Welcome to Cellular Agriculture for a Pandemic-Free Future. My name is George Ortega. This is episode number 54. I'm recording it on Sunday, September 20th at 3:34 p.m. Eastern Time. And, as I've said over the last several episodes, I'm in the process of transitioning from this series where we focus primarily on cellular agriculture as the only way that we have available to be relatively safe from future pandemics. In fact, we can be very safe with this new technology, to a series that that focuses more on the moral dimensions. In other words, like, we're having this pandemic because, from a moral perspective, if you believe in God, morality, we're very likely being punished for abusing, torturing 70 billion farm animals every year. From a scientific perspective, this is happening because those factory farms and wet markets and all, with these production facilities for animal products are pandemic factories. They're breeding grounds for pandemics. So, the reason I want to explore the moral dimensions of this is because, whether it's cellular agriculture or are all going vegan or are developing as a world universal vaccines that will eventually protect us from this, it's really a moral issue at its foundation. We don't do what we need to do to protect ourselves from these pandemics because of moral issues, because, primarily the moral issues of our leaders, but then again, we vote them into office, or we're apathetic about what's going on, and we don't demand that they do the right thing, or we don't care. So for this episode, I want to focus, because I've been, I think it's reasonable to suppose, since there's a scientific connection between our farming animals and these factory farms and these pandemics, epidemics in general, it's reasonable to suppose that this pandemic is our punishment from God, for our extreme cruelty. But, I've got to, that's a pretty strong, tight connection. It makes sense. But, because of events over the last several years, and especially an event yesterday, I'm beginning to wonder if it's not just this farming of animals that involves so much cruelty. For example, conservatives, I tend to be a liberal, and I've had an awakening on this. I've for decades kind of thought, well, pro-choice is the right position on abortion because what happens is a lot of people get born into this world that really isn't all that kind to people who are born into the world, sometimes if they're very poor. And my speculation has been, well, perhaps they're better off, not being born. I believe we all go to a better place, to a heaven. So that's how I've been perhaps rationalizing this, that it's perhaps a good thing that they're just not born into this world. Republicans have, over the last several decades, used abortion to recruit the religious, the evangelicals, moral majority, to vote for Republicans, notwithstanding Republican denial and indifference on climate change and so many issues where they show such extreme callousness. So I mean, like, my speculation now is that I'm becoming, and again, this is only ever a guess, because, how do we know the mind of God? We can only ever guess on this, but it seems like there's strong evidence to suggest that it's not just the factory farming. It's probably also this continuing to essentially kill as many people every year who are unborn as die of every other cause combined. That's, we lose 50 to 60 million people every year. We abort 50 to 60 million lives every year. So let me just go through the reasoning on this. So, we anticipated going from Obama to Clinton and, just pushing through a progressive agenda that would involve protecting the women, parents' rights. It shouldn't just be framed as a woman's right. It's a parent's, we give parents the right to essentially, end the life of their, unborn children. And so when Trump won in 2016, when it was so, the evidence was so powerfully in favor of Clinton, just like really winning, strongly even. She had like a 90+% chance of winning in so many polls. That got me wondering, when Republicans were successful in denying Obama the right to replace Scalia, in the Supreme Court, which would have solidified the right to choose, that was another kind of indication that perhaps God was guiding this in a way to show us Democrats, us liberals, that no, we're not as pristine, as good as we believe we are. And while the Republicans have a lot of problems, they actually may be right on this issue of abortion. And that actually remains to be seen. So anyway, so Trump wins, and we get some more changes in the Supreme Court. And the Republicans already have a 5-4 advantage at the Supreme Court, so they could have overturned Roe v. Wade already last year, the year before. They had the votes to do that. But for whatever reason, that didn't happen. And so now, think about this. Is this just coincidence? I mean, Ruth Bader Ginsburg said that, her most fervent wish was that she lived long enough to have a Democratic president replace her, which of course would have meant, again, someone to support abortion rights, pro-choice. Well, less than 2 months away from this election that would have allowed, God willing, if Biden wins, Biden to select the new Supreme Court justice, Ginsburg dies. Life and death is not in our hands, it's in the hands of God. God decides when we go. So it seems to me that God is saying to us, yeah, well, I tend to doubt both parties' sincerity on this. I doubt Republican sincerity on abortion, at least the leaders, and I doubt our Democratic leaders' sincerity on fighting climate change, because they've been talking this game for decades, and really nothing has been done on either front, or very little. So now, it seems that the Republicans are going to push through another Supreme Court justice who I imagine, and that'll be the test. In other words, so they'll push through a conservative justice that is pro-life because they have the votes, I would think. Perhaps they don't, I don't know. But if they do, then over the next couple of years, we will know for sure whether or not the Republican Party was just leading religious people astray, just basically telling them, oh yeah, we're going to end abortion, when they really never had the intention of doing that. So that'll, we'll see how that plays out. But, again, I think the wider issue, considering, Ginsburg's death less than 2 months before this election, and Scalia not being replaced by a liberal Supreme Court judge, and Trump winning, considering all that, and I doubt Trump cares about abortion. I mean, Trump cares about Trump. That's about the extent of his concern for anything. And so I just wanted to as we transition to this deeper exploration of the morality of why this is happening, and the morality and science, of course. I mean, the next series is going to be called God, Science, and COVID-19. So it'll cover both the religious and the scientific dimension of this, emphasizing the morality. So again, we will see how sincere, and you know, like, again, after decades of being a Democrat and supporting pro-choice, I now feel that it's probably much more wrong than I and people have deemed it to be. Because, like, Democrats have never said that it's all right. They just said that it's like they want to make abortions rare, you know, and safe. But you know, as many people dying each year as abortion throughout the world as die of every other cause combined, that is not rare. Yeah, they're safe, but you know, for whom? You know, certainly not for the children who lose their lives. And you know, just I mean, think of the inconsistency of abortion laws. You know, you can abort a child 6 months before it's born, but not 6 months after it's born. You know, and so, like, what is that? That seems like an arbitrary distinction. Yeah, I mean, like, you know, the child is real. You know, we can see it outside and all once it's born, but it's just as real and just as alive 6 months before it's born. All right, so again, I'm still waiting to start this new series. Hopefully I will start it this coming week. Yeah, as I said before, it's going to be, so is it just? I mean, it could be, and you want to know something, I mean, like, it's not that we should be pessimistic about what's going on, this COVID-19, this distancing, you know, the crazy politics. It could be God's way of just correcting decades and centuries long abuse on our part, just cruelty, inhumanity. It could be just as like parents correct their children's behavior to make them into better people so they can better enjoy their lives. You know, it could be, and I actually believe that, yeah, that our world is going through a moral reformation. We've had this happen in the past. You know, within Christianity, there was the reformation of the Protestants, who were against indulgences. Basically, the Catholic Church was selling forgiveness, absolution, to the highest bidder. You know, we've had this with slavery, when the Quakers in Pennsylvania finally said, you know, this is really wrong. A small group of people, you know, started the abolitionist movement, and that led to the Civil War. Apparently, it wasn't just enough to oppose slavery. We had to pay for that, you know, that institutional injustice through a civil war that killed a lot of people on both sides. But my point is that after slavery, and just like after World War II and after the Great Depression, the world got much better for a lot of people. So perhaps this is a combination. Perhaps, like, we're coming to a time where we realize we have no rational choice but to end factory farming. We either, you know, end factory farming, transition to cellular agriculture for our meat, dairy, eggs, you know, and fish, or we either live in perpetual dread of the next pandemic or experience an actual pandemic. And again, I've showed that table where it shows that over the first decade of the 2000s, there were 42 epidemics. That's 5 times as many as there were in the first millennium, you know, 0 to 1,000. They only had 8 epidemics back then. It's like I've gone through the reasons why that is. You know, 4 billion passenger flights, airline flights every year, and you know, the emergence of factory farming. You know, this system of farming animals that is not just exceedingly cruel. Again, it's just exceedingly unsanitary. And it brings more than this threat of pandemic. It brings with it the growing threat of antibiotic resistance, which makes our antibiotics effective, and that some experts have deemed that a greater threat to our well-being than even climate change. So, so what the idea is, like, imagine, because I think we're going to be doing some imagining. I don't want to frame this next series as, you know, we're just being evil in so many ways, and you know how horrible this is. I want to take a positive, optimistic stance on this perspective, by pointing out, by imagining how much more of a wonderful world we can create as we end abortion, as we end this cruelty towards 70 billion, you know, chicken and cows and pigs, you know, every year, over 70 billion. That's, you know, again, like with the abortion, God willing, they go, you know, according to Christian and Jewish theology, when a child dies before the age of responsibility, which I think is like, I don't know, 5 to 9, I don't know, it depends on the religion or whatever, but they presumably bypass any threat of going to hell, or less, you know. I personally believe we all go to heaven, you know, but you know, this idea that, so like, you know, I have felt that, well, perhaps abortion is you know, is better because of that. But again, what happened with Ginsburg and Trump winning and Scalia not being replaced by a liberal is, you know, if I walk around in the dark and I stub my toe, it doesn't take much reasoning to conclude that, well, that happened as punishment for my carelessness, my lack of concern. If I eat a lot of foods that are harmful and I develop a disease as a result, again, that's one can explain that by my immorality, my failing to properly take care of my health. And so this is what's happening with the pandemics and with the abortion. You know, I mean, it's probably all connected. You know, God, it's not just this threat of future pandemics, it's threat of antiviral resistance, bacterial resistance, and it's climate change, which is, you know, a decades-long challenge that you know, I actually think it's much more serious than antibiotic resistance, although it's not as eminent. You know, antibiotic resistance is something that we could be experiencing really seriously over the next 10, 20 years. You know, the detrimental effects of that. So, so yeah, and like, you know, there's going to be a lot of questions we need to answer. How can we be so, you know, setting aside the abortion issue, and we will explore that because I think it's important to, but, you know, more directly with paying people essentially to abuse and torture animals so that we can buy our meat and dairy and egg products at 1/4 of the cost that they would cost us otherwise. You know, ignoring the extreme suffering that they go through. Again, I've explained this before, the average egg-laying hen, they're kept in battery cages that are stacked on top of each other. And there are maybe 4 or 5 chickens per cage. And the cages are about, I'm not exaggerating, they're somewhere like 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot. They're small cubicles. It's, you know, maybe a little bigger than that. But the point is that no chicken inside those cages has enough room to even spread their wings. And they spend weeks at a time in these, months at a time actually, in these cages. And, you know, to add something that's much worse and much less sanitary, because they're stacked on top of each other and they don't get cleaned. You know, basically the chickens on top are defecating, urinating on the chickens on the bottom. And that's why we have to pump them full of antibiotics so they don't, you know, just get sick and die from that contamination. But that's just one example of extreme cruelty. And so, like, how do you explain this? I mean, because we humans tend to be good in a lot of ways. You know, look at this world today. Um, we we're living longer, living healthier. We've really 200 years ago, almost everybody on the planet was poor. Now, you know, there's still too many extremely poor people, about close to 1 billion, but that's like 1/7, less than 1/7, 1/8 perhaps of the entire population. So we've made a lot of progress on creating a world that is so much kinder, so much healthier and happier for so many people. So, you know, the argument that human beings are just inherently evil, you know, or just like incorrigible, that doesn't stand, because we do so much good, because we have done so much good, and you know, we can, you know, on a daily basis, people work hard, people raise their families, they're doing good all the time. So how do you explain this? How do you explain this? You know, it's kind of like somebody doing really good, but like, you know, just holding slaves, just like, you know, just it's difficult to explain, but we're going to delve into that. That's the thing. We're going to try to figure out some answers. Now, one I've offered before, and I'll go back to it because I believe, you know, that book up there, that's a book that I published called Free Will, Its Refutation, Societal Cost and Role in Climate Change Denial. It basically explains how, you know, basically we can't accept that we are being so callous, indifferent toward future generations, wrecking the climate for them through climate change. So what do? We deny that it's happening. We deny that it's serious. And that denial is founded upon this mistaken notion that what we do is fundamentally up to us. The way denial works in psychology is that basically we like to keep a positive self-image. We like to believe that we and the people around us are good people. So when confronted with evidence to the contrary, like that we're abusing 70 billion land animals every year, and like that we're destroying the climate for future generations, and like that we're aborting as many lives as die of every other cause combined, we will deny. We will, you know, back in the 70s, they were saying, oh, no, like a human life isn't a human life until it's born, which is such a bogus argument. With the animals, people say, oh, they don't feel pain. That's equally bogus. And again, with climate change, to deny that it's happening is like, it's beyond denial. And so, but that, you know, that belief that, you know, we're trying to protect our self-image through this denial. And unfortunately, because we buy into this belief in free will, we are not able to objectively face any of these, you know, atrocities. And if we can't face them, if we're in denial of them, then how are we going to solve them? You know, so that's a key component in this. But, you know, there's a lot more to it. You know, it's just the basic. I mean, how do you explain that? How do you explain, you know, people have dogs and cats, just moving to the animal abuse issue. People have dogs and cats and birds, you know, horses. People have grown up around animals. A lot of, you know, think about it. A lot of people who say they love their dogs and cats, they say they love animals, yet you see them at the supermarket every day, you know, buying this meat, not caring where it came from. You know, just knowing, it's difficult in this world to not know the abuse that is involved in, you know, raising these animals. You know, you have to be extremely uneducated, unexposed to just normal media to be ignorant of that reality. So it's not like people don't know what's going on. It's people don't care. And so again, this next series is going to explore that in more detail, because our understanding of this, our understanding the moral dimension of this, you know, and this I'm addressing that 80 to 90% of us here in the United States who believe in God or a higher power, you know, who have religious beliefs, you know, to the extent that we don't get this morality right, we will suffer consequences. We've gone through 2 major world wars, the Civil War, the 1918 pandemic that killed about 50 million people. It's not like God hasn't inflicted mass punishment on vast populations in the past. So we want to build a world where that's no longer the case. But again, for those atheists, or 10% of you who don't believe in God, or however, I mean, to me, it's an understanding. I mean, God, if there's a creation, there has to be a creator. If there's laws of nature, well, that's God. If you define God as everything, well, the universe is everything. So to me, God's existence is not a matter of belief; it's a matter of understanding. But again, for those who haven't reached that understanding, it's simple science to tell you that unless we end this factory farming, we run the risk of perhaps an even far worse pandemic. The people talk about how terrible this coronavirus is. There are viruses out there that are 40 times more lethal. Okay, our world hasn't yet lost 1 million people. And this is like, the 1918 population, I'm guessing, was what, about 1 billion, 2 billion people. So we've got, 3 times more people on here. Imagine, if we had a pandemic with the strength of the 1918 pandemic, we might lose 500 million people or more. It may be completely uncontrollable. So this is not something to take lightly. All right. So again, I'm going to plan to start the new show this week. It'll be again called God, Science, and COVID-19, and it's going to be a much harder show, because how do you explain this? I'm asking the questions. I'm not sure I've provided one answer with the in terms of denial, and maybe I'll have to do much more research to investigate people who've actually studied morality. But all right. Well, I'm under a minute, so hope you had a good weekend. Catch this every Monday through Friday until we hit, when we go to the new series, it'll be the same time, Monday through Friday, 5 o'clock. And catch, and the episodes are available on YouTube and on Spotify, iTunes, and other platforms as podcasts. So, again, hopefully, without understanding the morality of these issues like climate change, abortion, and animal abuse, we absolutely need to do that. Okay, thanks for watching. I'll see you again next time.